Hello everyone, this is part 24 of What If Naruto Got Lost During His Training TS, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. After bearing witness to such tragedies and atrocities, Mikio was thrust into the beginning of it all. He knew that even with his Kiri no Kami persona he would not be able to prevent all those things from happening. To the rest of the world, those things were very important events. But there was still something that he could do. The mist can hide things, many things, the mist can even hide a whole village. Mikio planned on doing something a la Naruto. Search and rescue was his new thing. He'd have to alter his Kiri no Kami persona a bit. The divine were not meant to directly interfere with the actions of mortals, so he would have to do things more subtly, by employing agents into this war-torn world. He would hide people in a mist so dense and thick that no one would be able to enter or leave without his say-so. It would be a caged paradise. He would be able to do this due to his knowledge of seals, some of the things that he picked up during his travels before leaving on his journey with Jiraiya. He also gained some more insight and experience in the sealing arts by just being in close proximity with one of the world's seal masters. While Mikio didn't have the capacity that Naruto possessed, he had enough to do the things that he needed to do. He knew how to perform Kage Bushin no Jutsu, and he would use those in Mizu Bushin to their full extent. He would also be making extensive use of henge, which would build up his myth. The power of a stai, kami, and or other higher being lay in their myth, and the belief of people. To think is to create, and that was one of the ways that the higher powers worked. Of course the being, chaos, and order didn't necessarily work that way, since those three just were. He traveled the land as he did in his previous adventure-filled dreams, but this time with more of a purpose than anything else. His clones traveled a short distance behind him, conserving their energies for the tasks that lay ahead. Mikio had memorized all the events that would occur, none of which had a detailed count of the lives that were lost in the battles and such. But there were records of prominent individuals that SD or were just lost to the world. These people would be too visible on the radar, so Mikio and his clones would concentrate on those that wouldn't really be missed all that much. There were stories of one of two of the defectors known to be the greatest swordsmen of the mist. One or two of these passed on into history with nary a word spoken about what had become of them. The visions that Mikio had seen did not show some of these men. Kasama, Zabuza and Reiga were shown, but the rest were not. Mikio would also be on the lookout for one or two of those other four. After a few successful rescue missions, and the people that he had rescued had been safely placed in the enclosed and hidden area, Mikio's power and status grew. His Kiri no Kami persona reached Kami status, but only for short periods of time. Mikio could remain a Kami for at most a whole week straight, thus enabling him to have access to powers that he normally would not have access to. But using such powers shortened his time in God mode. Each major power would lessen his time by a full hour. Minor powers would use up a fourth of an hour. The people he had rescued from the cold hands of death of a few frustrated Shinigami, along with the few other people that had seen him come and go, had bolstered his myth and their belief had strengthened his powers. He could compare himself to a demigod, or a Jinchuriki. Whereas a Jinchuriki held a Bayu at bay, Mikio held within him a Kami, or something like that. Whereas Jiraiya had influenced Hai no Kuni, Mikio was an influential and mythological being in both Rai and Mizu no Kuni, more so in Mizu than in Rai. But he still had a few rounds to make. After his last self-sent mission, Mikio had accumulated enough people power to populate a small village, well more like a village the size of the Nami no Kuni village that Naruto and Team 7 went to on their first C ranker. When he knew his time was up, he walked into the mist surrounding his hidden village, slowly vanishing back to his dreamscape where he would be sent off to another place and time. His people, followers, and believers were unintentionally left in a space that could be accessed by Rosuto no Kuni, starting from 500 years before Naruto was born. The people would interact and grow separate from the world just like Rosuto no Kuni, and would not be a part of the land of the lost, except in their existence. Mikio was expecting to find himself closer to his real time still in Mizu no Kuni, But alas, it was not meant to be. He found himself in the center of a massive hole in the ground, which was littered with rocks and boulders of all manner of shape and size. The hole in the ground did not look recent, it looked old, like something that had happened long before people existed in the country that he guessed he was in. Sure enough, he was right. Once he got out of the crater, the sight that met him confirmed it. He was in Tsuchi no Kuni. From his vantage point, as he was on a mountain, he could see the place that would in the future be a Wagaku no Sato. He had not received any vision of futures pasts and pasts futures. He had no real knowledge as to what to expect and what he could do in this country, in this land of earth. So he supposed that he would have to find a way to become like his Raijin and Kiri no Kami personas. He walked the length and breadth of the country for 3 whole years before he knew how he would make a mythological name for himself. Through past experiences, he knew that due to his actions he had or should have changed the flow and course of time as he knew it, but it seemed that he had not. That meant that there was some higher power that enabled or made it so that anything that he did do, was somehow fit into the flow of time as he knew it. Things that were supposed to happen still happened, nothing that he had done had changed the future one bit. How he knew this he didn't know. But he did know that events and the like that he knew had occurred still occurred. He also knew that everyone's perception of the present and history was very different and unique, so although they lived in the same dimension, world, time, and place, their view of events were different, and their knowledge of the flow of time flawed. This was the basis upon which Mikio and his friends could act. It was also how Rosuto no Kuni was able to exist. The only things that they all avoided were actively changing the past for their betterment. Like how Mikio didn't attempt to save everyone in the blood purge. Another thing was how Jiraiya did his thing, aka being the cause for the creation, birth, and or existence of some things. After those 3 years, Mikio noticed that the land didn't look like the Tsuchi no Kuni that he knew. He realized that he had been given the chance to play with a hell of a lot more clay than he had ever dreamed of. So whenever there were a few people around, which was more like a tribe or clan of people or 3, he would enter God mode and stay in it for around 3 days, shaping the land to what he knew it to more or less look like, as well as some other different forms and shapes and sizes. When he was in God mode, Mikio wore a royal purple cheongsam, which was a long shirt with long sleeves, and long pants. His hair was changed somewhat, it was light gray that had a certain touch of luminosity. All of his movements showed the gracefulness of a god of water, the precision and agility of a god of lightning, and the masculinity and strength of the earth. His utilization of his god powers, and his jutsu, allowed him to not only shape the landscape, but also add a touch of greenery to it. His arsenal of Raiten jutsus allowed him to electrify and even energize portions of the land, allowing for a fast flow of chi. His Seiyutin jutsus allow some areas for produce more fruits of the earth after human hands had applied a helping hand. His ability was like Juashu but on a smaller scale. As he moved about and appeared in many places, he did not make his presence known alone. With him he had 2 companions, both of which were just Bushin, the regular kind, but sporting henges that made them look like his god mode. The difference between the 3 Mikios was that the real one's skin had a golden brownish tint, while the Bushin that represented his Mizu aspect had a blue-green tint, and the Bushin that represented his Rai aspect was just pale, but had sparks run up and down his skin, visible even at a distance. After being spotted or seen all over the country, Mikio's 3 god forms gained the title of Kaibyaku no Sankami, while his central character in the Tsuchi pantheon was dubbed as Yochigami. Unlike Rai no Kuni that had lots of lightning flying all over the place, and Mizu no Kuni that had lots of boss of water, Tsuchi no Kuni only had the fruits of the earth to sustain the people. Mikio had to depend on the plants for nutrients. For some reason he avoided eating meat. What Mikio was unaware of was that he was not the only one that was time traveling here and there in elemental. Juashu also did a bit of traveling himself. What else was he to do when he had to wait 1,000 years before he could interact with the other people he considered his friends? Outside of Rosuto no Kuni he performed feats of skill and other things. He was one of the movers and shakers of the continent, quite literally too. When Mikio wasn't around, Juashu would step in and make sure that Raijin, Kiri no Kami, and Yochigami's myths didn't in their physical absence. But one thing that he did that separated him from Mikio was that he was God mode 24/7. He made himself known as the big brother of Mikio's 3 god forms. Where Mikio was cautious and careful with his actions, Juashu found his time hopping and shopping as the perfect opportunities to cut loose. He knew the timeline of the outside world, and had even memorized it. Zombie Sensei informed him that he had free reign in what he could do to the elemental continent. And do as he pleased he did. Unexplained natural and unnatural disasters that befell the world or just one country or two, those events that were chalked up to a mischievous kami, were almost all his doing. There was some enlightened or honored being that would pop up now and again to take credit for an event that was to occur, and Juashu obliged them. There was more than enough of the continent to share with a few others. Tsunami no Kuni rose and fell with the tides. It had gotten its name from the time when Juashu sneezed and caused a tsunami to form which would have covered the land if it were not for some water god creating storms that dispersed the giant wave before it even reached land. That or those incidents were mostly accidents on Juashu's part. The tsunami was caused from the sneeze while Juashu was shifting from water to the wind. Juashu's presence in Tsuchi no Kuni was the opposite of Mikio's. Whereas Mikio brought about positive change, Juashu brought about earthquakes and mudslides. He was the bane of all higher beings that roamed the land of earth. He left destruction in his wake. Regular luck returned to the land every time he left. At one point in time the land of earth suffered a great earthquake that toppled mountains. This event was the most insane one in the history of the land. It was the only time that Mikio and Juashu were in the same land at the exact same time, with no other gods present, just watching. It was a clash of the Tans. The event happened just after the founding of Awagakure no Sato. Atop the mountain that hid the village stood Mikio. On the mountain that served as the capital of Tsuchi no Kuni stood Juashu. Their combined presences conflicted, their energies were instable. One wishing to create, to mold, to heal, to make new, and one wishing to cause chaos, calamity, to destroy, to eradicate. Mountains crumbled and reformed as the two opposing forces did battle. For 3 whole years after the founding of Awagakure no Sato, the two brothers did battle, Juashu sustaining Mikio's god form to prolong his entertainment. Mikio did not notice his prolonged stay in god mode. Many Doton Jutsu were born in the span of those 3 years. The Tsuchikage of that time sent out teams of shinobi to survey the battle and get ideas from the happenings all over the country. Mikio and Juashu deployed Tsuchi bushins of themselves to fight each other in a massive battle royale. These were the battles in which the Iwa Nin picked up many jutsu as well as ideas for jutsu. Rokudo no Sennin was the father and founder of chakra, forever immortalized in the history books as such. But the information and use of chakra was fairly primitive. It was his use of nature chakra that made him truly great. His ninjutsu was limited as the world had just been reborn then. So his legacy was a bit limited. But little did he know that one day his teachings would be used by the kamis themselves. Since the two battling brothers never left their places atop the mountains, some people were able to glean a taijutsu style from their movements. This taijutsu style would later become known as Tsuchi no Kuni's 2 hardest to learn, master, and use styles. Juashu's style was powerful and filled with rage. Most of the strikes that he employed to move the earth to do his bidding were mostly punches, there were a few kicks in between. Juashu was the solidified earth, he was as a rock. Mikio on the other hand was everything else. His style was the rock-hard determination of the mountains that allowed such colossal structures of nature to stand firm through all the test of time. He was the reason why a mudslide was so overpowering. Although his strikes were not all that powerful, the sheer number that were let loose was more than enough to make up for the lack of physical strength. The only times that his movements showed their strength was when he was protecting and defending. In one part of the country a small city stood. It was in the middle of 9 mountains. From these 9 mountains 9 earth dragons formed and flew towards the city, intent on its destruction. But a dome rose up from the earth around the city. From mud the earth turned to stone, then to diamond. The dragons stood no chance against such a defense. Once the dragons' powers were all used up, and their limp earthen boss fell limply to the ground, the dome receded back into the earth. The city was then dubbed the diamond mine capital of Tsuchi no Kuni. The incident that ended the 3-year battle was when in his frustration at being unable to overpower the defending Mikio, Juashu unleashed his burning will on the earth. Instead of forming just a mountain, he let loose his powers and formed a volcano. Upon completion, the volcano erupted in a shower of molten rock. The lava did not flow out of the crater, it flew high in the air just as hot as it had been within the bowels of the earth. As the lava fell down in a blindingly bright rain of molten rocks, Mikio did the only thing he could think of. He covered the whole of Earth country in a dome of earth, all manner of rock and mineral and precious stone, formed a dome and protected the inhabitants of the land. The shadow of the earth protected its people. After that final move, the battle had ended. The volcano instantly became extinct, and the dome receded back into the earth. The land of Earth was hidden from the world for an entire 24 hours. The volcano did not grow within the borders of Earth, but within the borders of fire. One of the reasons as to why Tsuchi and Hi no Kuni have a strong dislike for one another is because of the end of that one Tannic battle. All over Elemental other such incidents occurred, but none as bad as that one. After their battle in Earth, the two brothers never again did battle. Another big thing that Juashu had a hand in was the reason as to why Shukaku was had the misfortune of getting stuck with a mad monk. At the time Juashu was unaware of the consequences of his actions, but in the future it would lead to one of his best friends going somewhat genocidally insane. Who knew that playing a massive prank on the Wind Temple would cause one of its monk to go mad enough to want to go stir crazy enough to seal his mind into the mind of a Bayu. Shukaku was a lazy ass when he was not studying or being under the ever-watchful and penetrating eyes of Kyonshi. Like the other Bayu, especially Token, Shukaku was also at one time the student of Kyonshi. Lounging around in the sea of sand known as Kase no Kuni, the Tauki was unaware that a mad monk had designs of becoming immortal through merging or sealing his mind in an already happy-go-lucky tanuki. The monk wanted revenge on the higher power that had caused chaos to occur in his belovedly peaceful nirvana-like home. Juashu, while enacting his massive prank, had disguised himself as a number of people, unknowingly one of which was someone that resembled the Yondaime Kazekage, and was part of the reason why Gaara had a strong dislike for his father. While Mikio and Juashu were trading blows, Jiraiya was messing with the minds of the denizens of Hi no Kuni, and Haru was busy with his familial duties. Ikaku also had his fair share of adventures, most of which were tame in comparison with the other men in his group. Being a happily married man to a more or less goddess did not change his outlook on life, his personality did not undergo any real changes. That was why even his dreams did not allow his adventures to change. One of the places that Ikaku had found himself in was Kase no Kuni. Present-day Kase no Kuni to be exact, complete with Subaku no Gaara as Godime Kazekage. Normally something like this would not be a problem, if it weren't for the fact that Ikaku had accidentally asked the wrong person about the possible whereabouts of a certain blonde-haired knuckle-headed ninja. Tenmari was quite surprised to be asked if she had seen a blonde-haired shinobi with whisker-like birthmarks on his face by a guy who for some reason was wearing a black cloak with a pattern of clouds on it. Akatsuki was something that all the shinobi villages ken about, specifically those that had jinchuriki living in them. It was definitely understandable that Ikaku would find himself hunted down by the entirety of the Suna military forces in the span of a few minutes. The Sennin managed to outrun and outmaneuver each and every one of his pursuers, all the while wondering if maybe Naruto was someone that the village hated or something like that. He failed to notice that he looked like one of the Akatsuki. He had scores of puppets on his tail when he was flying through the air. When he was running on the ground and on the sands and dunes, he was followed by the shinobi of Suna. It was madness. Shuriken, kunai, and all sorts of pointy and shiny things were thrown in his direction. Jutsu were also sent his way. Lots and lots of Fuyuten and Doten jutsu were used in an attempt to possibly capture or kill the Akatsuki member. For the first 4 hours of the game of cat and mouse, the pursuers were made up of only shinobi ranked below Kage. It was during the 5th hour that Ikaku ran into a quite sandy problem. The Kazekage had managed to free himself from the overprotective people that had somehow managed to detain him. But now he was out and about and ready for anything. Which was why Ikaku had to whip out his weapon of choice and cast a few defensive attacks of his own, none of which being jutsu. The elder and puppet master who wielded the puppet collection of Chilimatsu Monzemon realized that Ikaku was not using any chakra, at all. As she stopped her assault, so did some of the other shinobi. Those that halted their assaults wondered why the old kunoiki had stopped in her relentless attacks. After a few minutes of avoiding the sly and sandy grasp of the Ichibi Jinchuriki, Ikaku got fed up with all the running and stuff. They were only normal people after all, not monsters from the Black Abyss or the Blue Lagoon or something more sinister. So with one spell he restrained them all. Being a Sennin, he was also able to paralyze the Kazekage and his sand. Once that was done, he walked over to the Kazekage and asked why an entire village had gone out of its way just to make him feel not at home. The last time that he was in the village, he was not treated the way he was treated this time. He wanted and needed to know the reason behind such open hostility. After a few minutes of waiting for an answer and not getting one, he remembered that the person that he was speaking to had been frozen in time via a spell, so he removed part of the spell to allow the cage to speak. After hearing a mocking explanation, Ikaku finally realized that he did in fact look like an Akatsuki member. He also noticed that there were seals placed all over the cloak, so he cancelled them all and cursed whomsoever was it that had made him run the gauntlet. He was rewarded by a big lump of hail sing into him that came from seemingly out of nowhere. A note was attached to it, which he read after he got his bearings back. "I heard that," was what was written on the note. Under the message was the mark of the Dragon King. After explaining to the paralyzed cage that he was just looking for his friend's, Jiraiya's, student, who was missing. When the Kazekage heard that his friend was missing, he was able to break the spell placed on him and immediately wrapped the sage in sand, and threatened to squish him if he didn't fully explain what he meant by saying that Naruto was missing. The Sennin had him promise that he wouldn't tell the Hokage before he would tell him the whole story. The Sennin did not fear for his life and actually started to resemble a lunatic. As when dealing with all crazy people, caution was advised. Gaara was still considered a slightly insane person, but someone who did not use chakra was an unknown and that merited some caution. So he made the promise and listened to Ikaku's tale. When he asked the Sennin where his companions were, the Sennin told the cage that they were most likely still in some other country or something like that. It was a puzzling answer, not knowing where Onz's traveling companions were. But the cage was forced to believe the Sennin, especially after said Sennin informed the cage that he could leave whenever he wished, demonstrating it by phasing through the sand then phasing back in. It was a weird sign of trust. In the end, Gaara was forced to let the Sennin go. After which the Sennin went on his way, into the desert to seek out way to get to another time, a time that was not a part of the present. After he was a few meters away from the entirety of the Suna military might, he dispelled the spell that was holding all of them in place and vanished into a sandstorm that had come out of nowhere. It quickly disappeared after he entered, showing that no one was there. Gaara, bound by his word, did not inform the Nara when he came by Suna, due to his ambassador status. But the other Suna nin did inform the Konoha nin of a cloaked figure seeking the whereabouts of Naruto. The reason as to why the group of 4 men and 1 woman were heading for Konohagakure no Sato with 2 weeks' worth of searching, seeking, and adventure time, was because Jiraiya had received word that he was to return to Konoha ASAP, with his student in tow. The group couldn't help him in finding a way out of a direct order from his cage and teammate. So the group made their slow death march to Konoha. Jiraiya counted the seconds till he found his doom. He just hoped that Kiyomi wouldn't K him for being ked by another woman. Of course, the Gama Sennin was not prepared for a few surprising things that awaited him and his posse during the final leg of their journey. The voice also managed to send a final message to Mikio, telling him that should Jiraiya ever find himself in trouble via a busty and blonde woman, Mikio was to bodily defend his friend. Another voice entered the conversation, one of an old man, that informed Mikio that their adventures weren't up yet. With that final message, Hyakuma, Dorotobo, Token, and Kyonshi sat on a couch in front of a television, ate popcorn and watched the finale of the show which the 4 of them had helped produce. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.